The hallway floorboard groaned before I even saw the shadow. I froze against the kitchen counter, my breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat. The digital clock on the microwave read 2:14 a.m. I knew I should have gone back to bed. I knew I should have pulled the covers over my head and pretended I heard nothing. But the garage door was already rolling up. Slow, deliberate. The headlights cut through the blinds like a blade. I watched his silhouette step into the driver's seat. He didn't look back at the house. He never did. I just stood there in the dark, waiting for the engine to turn over, knowing my life was about to split in two. We had spent 7 years building a quiet life. The kind people envy without ever asking questions. We bought the house with the peeling porch paint because it needed work, and we liked fixing things together. He worked long hours at the distribution center. I kept the books for a local firm. We paid our bills on time. We drank black coffee on Sunday mornings. We never raised our voices. Or so I thought. Looking back, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was careful. Every conversation felt measured. Every smile held its breath. I used to think that was just how love settled into place. I was wrong. It was just waiting. The first crack showed in the little things. A missing receipt. A changed password on his laptop. A sudden habit of leaving his phone face down on the counter. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia doesn't make your hands shake when you're just pouring milk. I started watching him closer. Not out of suspicion. Out of a quiet, creeping dread. I wanted to believe the man who fixed my flat tire was the same man who came home at night. I just didn't know which version of him I was actually living with. And then the garage door opened. The engine hummed. The street swallowed him whole. I stood in the cold kitchen, listening to the tires fade, and realized I had no idea where he was going, or who he was meeting. I didn't plan to follow him. I swear I didn't. But my keys were already in my hand before I made the choice. I left the porch light off. I backed out of the driveway without turning on my headlights. The road felt too wide. The night felt too heavy. I kept 3 car lengths behind his taillights, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. He didn't take the highway. He drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past rows of identical houses and closed storefronts. My chest tightened with every turn. I kept telling myself to turn around. But I couldn't stop. Not when the truth felt so close I could almost taste it. He pulled into a dimly lit lot behind an old laundromat. I parked across the street, killing the engine. The street lamp flickered. I watched him step out. A woman was waiting by the brick wall. She wore a heavy coat. She looked exhausted. He handed her a thick envelope. I cracked my window just an inch. The night air carried his voice, low and strained. "It's all there. Don't spend it at once." She whispered back, "Thank you. For everything." The words hit me like cold water. It wasn't an affair. It was something heavier. Something I couldn't name yet. My phone buzzed in my cup holder. I jumped. He turned toward my car. I ducked below the dashboard, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I peeked over the edge, he was already walking back to his vehicle. I waited until his taillights vanished before I started my engine. I drove home in silence. I sat in the driveway, staring at the front door. I knew I should have gone inside. I knew I should have pretended I never left the bed. But the envelope was already burning a hole in my mind. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would follow him again. The next week felt like walking on glass. I watched him pack his lunch. I watched him tie his shoes. I watched him check his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his collar like he was bracing for a fight. I stopped asking about his day. I stopped asking about anything. The silence between us grew thick, suffocating. I told myself I was protecting him. I told myself I was protecting us. But really, I was just collecting evidence. I started checking the glove compartment when he showered. I found nothing but old receipts and a half-empty pack of gum. I started watching his bank statements. The numbers didn't add up. Large cash withdrawals. Every other Friday. Always the same amount. I felt sick. I felt guilty. I felt like a stranger in my own home. One evening, he left his jacket on the kitchen chair. The inner pocket bulged. I knew I shouldn't touch it. I knew it was wrong. My fingers trembled as I reached inside. I pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. It wasn't a love letter. It was a list. Dates, times, license plate numbers. My breath caught. I flipped it over. At the bottom, in his handwriting, it said, "Keep him safe. Just keep him safe." I didn't understand. I couldn't process it. The floorboards creaked behind me. I shoved the paper back into the pocket and turned around. He was standing in the doorway. His face was pale. His eyes locked onto the jacket. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me. He just stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You weren't supposed to see that." I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. He took the jacket. He hung it on the hook. He walked past me into the living room and sat down in the dark. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum, feeling the walls close in. I had crossed the line. There was no going back. But the worst part wasn't the secret. The worst part was realizing he had been carrying it alone for years. And I had no idea how to help him put it down. I went to bed that night with my back to him. I listened to his breathing. I wondered if he was awake. I wondered if he was waiting for me to ask. I didn't. I just closed my eyes and pretended I didn't know. But pretending doesn't stop the truth from rotting you from the inside out. 3 days later, I broke. I couldn't carry the weight of his silence anymore. I couldn't carry my own. He was in the garage, sorting through old tools. The afternoon light cut through the dusty windows. I walked down the driveway. I didn't knock. I just opened the door and stood in the threshold. He looked up. He saw my face. He knew. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just placed the folded notebook paper on the workbench between us. "Who is he?" I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. He dropped the wrench. It clattered against the concrete. He didn't look away. He just rubbed his face with both hands, his shoulders sinking. "My brother. The one we said doesn't exist." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him. I stared at the paper. I thought about the cash, the list, the fear in his eyes at the laundromat. It wasn't a secret life. It was a secret family. A brother he had been paying off, hiding, protecting from a past I knew nothing about. I reached out. I touched his arm. He flinched. Then he leaned into my hand, his breath shaking. "I didn't want you to carry this. I didn't want you to know what I'm capable of." I finally understood. The quiet life wasn't built on peace. It was built on a dam, and I had just cracked it wide open. The truth didn't fix anything. It just changed the shape of the pain. We sat at the kitchen table until the coffee went cold. He told me everything. The brother, the deaths, the threats from men who didn't forgive, the years of sleeping with one eye open, the guilt of lying to me every single day. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I just watched his hands shake around the mug. I wanted to forgive him. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and tell him it was okay. But the words wouldn't come. How do you forgive a lie that big? How do you look at the man you love and realize you never really knew him at all? The house felt different after that. The walls felt thinner. The floorboards felt louder. Every time he left for work, I felt a spike of panic. Every time he came home, I searched his face for signs of trouble. We stopped sleeping in the same bed, not because of anger, because of the space between us, the space where the truth lived. I started checking the locks twice. I started keeping my phone charged. I started watching the street. The fear wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It lived in my stomach. It lived in the way I jumped at car doors slamming. It lived in the way I looked at him across the room and wondered if we were safe, or if we were just waiting. I started noticing the little signs of his exhaustion, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled when he poured coffee. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to tell him he didn't have to carry it alone. But the words felt like glass in my throat. If I spoke, I'd break the fragile peace we'd built. If I stayed silent, I'd drown in it. So I did nothing. I just watched. I just waited. I just let the distance grow between us, inch by quiet inch. One night, I woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. I didn't look at it. I just stared at the ceiling. I knew what it meant. I knew he would get up. I knew he would leave. And I knew I would let him, because staying silent had become its own kind of loyalty. I rolled over and pulled the blanket over my head. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. I listened to the garage door open. I listened to the engine start. And I realized, with a hollow ache in my chest, that I had become part of the secret. I wasn't just watching it anymore. I was protecting it. And I didn't know how to stop. We never fixed it. We just learned how to live around it. He still leaves on Friday nights. I still sit by the window and watch the taillights disappear. We don't talk about the brother. We don't talk about the money. We talk about the weather. We talk about the grocery list. We talk about everything except the thing that actually matters. Some days I hate him for it. Some days I hate myself for staying. But most days I just feel tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I used to think love was about knowing everything. Now I know it's about choosing what you can live with. I chose him. I chose the silence. I chose the wait. It's not a happy ending. It's not a tragedy either. It's just a life. A quiet, careful, fractured life. And I wake up every morning, make the coffee, and wait for the garage door to close. That's all we have. That's all we'll ever have. I finally understand why he never looked back that night. He wasn't leaving me behind. He was making sure I'd still be there when he returned.